Moving back to item number 2 on the consent agenda, which was removed from the consent agenda, approval of a replat of the property located at 102 Bridget Lane. And I'll open that for discussion with the council at this time. And Councilman Ramsey, since you did remove it, I will defer to you at this point.
All right, I'd like to, since the recommendation was made by our code enforcement officer, I'd like for him to present his facts, and anyone else who I'll have questions for regarding that.
Yeah, this was a request for a replat of property from one lot into 2 lots at 102 Bridget Lane. And the request was submitted by Marilyn Phillips, the owner's representative. The property is owned by Glen and Kim West. This was before the council, I believe it was last council meeting. October. And it got sent back for the way the property was divided up at that time. There was some question about access on the property for parking. And this resubmission, which went before the Planning and Zoning Commission on November 17th, was approved by them. And as you can see, maybe you can see, what's changed here is that an easement's been added to the property to allow access to the carport area. That was before the driveway was divided in half. And that's just a blow up of what you all have in your packets.
Do you have a question, Councilman Ramsey?
Yes. So the easement is going to go back to the carport and stop, and the land, the lot line will be divided where the solid is, because you've got dots going all the way down. So is the easement going to go all the way back to the back part of the property?
No, that's probably confusing because the dotted lines that go all the way to the back are utility easements on the property. You'll see them on both sides of the property. They run back there. Those are easements for utilities or build lines. It doesn't actually go all the way back. And you see that little square where it says 12.00?
Yes.
That's where it ends. So it's 34 feet from the road and 12 feet wide.
Okay, with the pictures, the aerial pictures are the exact same, and I appreciate the new drawing that's in there. I looked back at my scribble notes, which I brought with me, and a copy of the minutes from October. And in that discussion, the council made statements. There were 3 councilmen that made statements regarding that it not be divided down the driveway. And there's nothing in there about easement. And until we got this other thing, I want to know how it was, how it was presented to the P&Z without the mention of an easement in any of the information that we have. It just shows it's divided, but it doesn't say anything about easement on any of these papers. So who represented them at the P&Z, I need to know how it was explained to the P&Z. Is there not anyone here to?
Marilyn Phillips is here representing the owner, but Marilyn was not able to be at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, so I basically presented it to them. And the only difference is that it was explained to the Planning and Zoning that the lot lines are the same as it was in the beginning, 60-foot wide, the full length of the property, but there is a 12-foot wide, 34-foot deep easement to allow them access to the carport. That allows for the property lines in perpetuity to be straight. Whether or not they use the easement or need the easement sometime in the future, they can do away with that without having to change the property lines.
And according to our ordinances, even though there's a driveway to that property, they have to have their own separate driveway and easement. Is that correct?
There is a separate entrance under that property for a driveway.
So basically, if they're going to build their fence line, it has to be on the side of the on the inside of what I call the easement, or their side, the property, new property owner's side of the easement.
That is correct.
So are they buying that easement when they buy that?
Absolutely. It'll be the.
So they're buying, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure I understand.
Sure.
So when they buy that property, they're paying taxes on an easement that they may put a fence up just for privacy within that.
They can't block the easement. Now, if you read on the map that was given, it says the easement, 12 by 34, access easement for lot 1A or 1R, I can't tell, 1R, I guess. That says the only use of that easement is for that adjoining property owner. This is not a utility easement or anything else. But it would keep someone from putting a fence across that and blocking the access by the owner of lot 1R. Until at some point in the future, the owner of that property can give them the easement back and negate it if they would like to.
Okay, I may be totally blind, and I know I need to have my eyes checked, but I don't see any verbiage that says anything on there about the easement.
It's on the mylar of the plat itself.
Yeah, but there's no verbiage, it just shows that there's an easement.
It's on, yes, the verbiage is on the plat, on the mylar itself. And it has to be signed by the property owner.
But on this piece of paper we have,
Since you were only given a copy of a part of that full plat, Ray, do you have that? We can read that to you.
no, my concern is there's nothing in the information that I received in my packet that talks about the easement.
The easement is shown in your packet, but just the verbiage where it says.
The verbiage is not.
The verbiage is not, because it was on the full-size, very large copy of the map itself that'll be recorded. State of Texas, County of Somervell, the owner of the land shown on this plat and whose names are subscribed hereto, and in person or through a duly authorized agent, dedicates to the use of the public fair all streets, alleys, parks, watercourses, drains, easement, and public places thereon shown for the purpose of consideration therein. And
So, I want to make sure I understand.
yes,
Since I know what I scribbled, I can't speak for any of you, what I scribbled in my scribble notes. The only purpose for the easement is to give them the full length across that they need for the property, rather than to take it to the side of the fence by the driveway and then have to cut back over. Is that my understanding?
okay, I'm not sure, I didn't understand the question.
Okay.
Let me see if I can explain it. The lot maintains, for the new owner, if lot 2R sells to somebody else, they can put a house on it, their property line will be the 60-foot, .06, the full depth of the property. So they'll have a large enough lot to actually build on. The part of it that there is an access easement, 12 feet by 34 feet, is dedicated to just the owners of lot 1R, and that's the only ones that have access to that easement. Now, the owner of the property has access to it, and they can do what they want to, and they can, be neighborly and do however they want to. But the general public does not have access to this easement. It's not a public easement, it is just for the owner of lot 1R.
No, I guess I understand what you're saying, but
Okay.
my question is, the only reason we're giving the easement is because they need that extra land to qualify for the amount of land and footage or acreage to build a house. Is
No.
that-
No, they didn't have to do that. The reason to keep the lot straight, the lot line straight, is in the future, whether it's 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, there won't be any question about where the property line is. And I've seen over the years, problems where you have lot lines that are crooked, that are going around, something that is temporary. And so keeping the lot line straight is more important than, than going around a driveway, because the driveway can be done through an easement, which can be corrected, corrected, can be changed in the future without changing the property line.
So her, Ms. West's easement for my concrete purposes,
Mhm.
the access of the easement is from the edge of her carport and back. I mean, where we're talking about the carport, one of the things we talked about before was her having to be able to back out.
Right.
Okay, so so those people are buying, whoever they are buying the land from the edge of her carport, and even though over whatever the 5 feet is for the easement, they're paying for that land.
Sure. Now, the easement does not go all the way to her carport. There's about, I believe it's either 11 feet or 13 feet from where the property line divided that driveway into 2 pieces. It's been too long since I've looked at it.
So, okay. I'm sorry.
Sure.
This is,
And
if
it's-
y'all have any questions, interrupt me.
While you're thinking about that, another question.
Yes.
This may go more towards Ray. I'm not sure on how we've done it in the past as far as easements within city limits. Is this something that we've done? Have you noticed any
Yep.
other easements that we have for
As
driveway
far as-
property here?
The only easements I've seen since I've been here have been basically utility easements. I haven't seen this type of easement, but it's legal. It's just,
Right.
you normally see this more out in the county,
Right.
and roads where people have long driveways to their properties and stuff. You see that more here, but you can have easements in the city. And you don't see it too often, but as far as I know, and I'm not an attorney,
Right.
they're legal.
Councilman Marcus, your question?
I don't know which would be the most confusing to me, to have the property line that's not straight, or to have an easement 10 years down the road. And people got to figure out this 12 or 34, who owns it, who's got the right to use it. When property changes hands 2 or 3 times, and something else that I'm gonna say about that, is whomever buys that other piece of property, that's 34 by 12, but you're never gonna be able to use it, because it stays with the remaining property. And they're gonna be paying taxes on it, right?
That's correct.
They're gonna be paying taxes on it, and it's not gonna be their land. To me, I would have a problem with that if I was considering buying it, but I'm paying taxes on this land, I'm never gonna have it.
They will know that, though, at the time that the...
Well, I know they will, but it's still kinda,
It's their choice at that point. They can choose not to buy the property if they don't like the idea of the easement. But the biggest part of that easement is in one of the 2 easements, or with the build line and the easement, the 7-foot setback off the side of the property. So you've only got about a 5-foot wide, not 5 foot by 9 foot, that they could have otherwise used. And that they can, that's really the only part of it that becomes unusable that would have otherwise been usable.
Councilman Moore. Brian?
I guess one of my concerns is, anytime you're talking about an easement, there's gonna be some confusion, I guess, somewhere down the road. What if you have a purchaser and you become disgruntled neighbors? What happens then? If somebody's parked in the road, are we talking about now emergency type situations that where vehicles blocking, emergency vehicle?
Can answer that for him, maybe, I don't know.
Councilman Chambers?
The easements that I've been involved in, that I've split off and sold, and split off and kept, it's very well spelled out in title company. I mean, it is black and white down to the T. And that easement, goes with, just like you're saying, stays with that property there. Where we're gonna get in trouble, I would think, is if the fence line is gonna stop at 12 foot or 34 foot from the road. But the build, the setbacks, like what Kyle was saying, the biggest part of that easement that goes into that carport is unusable anyhow. The fence is where, if they ever want to run a fence down there, the easement's gonna keep them doing that. But I guess I'm getting lost. Marilyn, correct me if I'm wrong here, anytime I've been involved in it, the easements are very well defined and laid out in the contracts. The buyer, purchaser both
They're all
understand.
recorded at the courthouse and follows the property.
Not that you couldn't have problems, but I've never had problems, is what I'm trying to say,
Right.
in that specific instance.
Councilman.
So what happened to our original suggestion about, I mean, making this simple, locking the property off without the easement and turning the other part of the property into a driveway and referral to, there's a spot in the front and a spot in the back? What happened to that? I mean, that's what, I believe what the council suggested, and then now we've got this. I thought this was gonna be more open and closed, and now we've got something else we're looking at.
I don't see a big problem with easement, I mean, because it's a buyer beware type thing. If they don't like the easement, they don't have to buy it. I know it's set up to give her access to this house, and the way I understood it, the house is not in great repair anyway. And 20 years from now, I could very well see that house leveled and somebody else builds a very nice piece of house farther back in the property away from the fence line, make it more normal looking. But for simplicity's sake, this does divide the property well. It does give her access, and they've got another access from the street to that lot on the left. I mean, there's a curb there, so the driveway, so I don't see any problems.
Councilman Ramsey?
Okay, back to me, the dumb blonde. Okay. My basic question is, when they put their fence up, supposing they put a privacy fence up, can it come as far down that it closes her carport?
No.
No,
So the fence has to stop on the back side of the carport.
that is correct.
So they cannot put a privacy fence up that would block anything where the other house is.
That is correct.
Okay, that's where my concern is. And I do know, Mike, that in the ordinances, they have to have they have to have a driveway of their own. They may do, but they've got to have that second driveway, because every house is required to, they have to have that driveway there.
Right about there.
So as far as the new people that buy it, they won't be using that drive.
No.
Right, so why the easement?
That's my whole point.
That doesn't make any sense. Why the easement if they've got to have another separate driveway? If every property has to have their own driveway, which is the way I understood when I had mine poured, is that you have to have your own driveway per residency. And so if they're gonna have to put another one in, why the easement on that one?
Dennis, may I?
Yes, come to vote.
Marilyn Phillips, for Kim West, and I live at 5832 Farmington 56 South. The purpose for this easement, if I can get a little bit closer, is there's a driveway right here on this property already set in. Kim's house was grandfathered because when this property was bought, it was all one lot. So if we split the property to the 60 feet, which is required, Kim's driveway to give her room to swing in was not wide enough. And if I'm not mistaken, it was suggested at that meeting that we presented this, why not give an easement? And that's when we went back to that, because all the way through, I was trying to survey this out and just make it just one clean swoop. And it was suggested just go back, keep the property lines the same, and just give her an easement to swing in. But the reason being, I hope I answer your question, she did not have enough room to swing in and pull into and out of her carport as it stands. To move the carport, there's plenty of room down that alley to move the carport to the back, but she would have to pave that alley, which is monetary, does not sit well with the budget at all. But that's the purpose, if I answered your question.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Okay.
Yeah, Councilman Bryant.
Does that replace the city policy about having to have your own individual driveway? Because I thought that's what the whole purpose of that was.
That's my understanding too, is that the ordinance state that you have to have your own driveway on your own property. I guess if you create it legally, it is, then the question is it's not meeting the criteria of the ordinance.